Alright, good afternoon. Today I'm going to present a paper called The Heat of the Moment, the Effect of Sexual Arousal on Sexual Decision. The motivation behind this paper and choosing this paper came about from reading the chapter on sexual assault, as well as my background in human evolutionary biology. The reason why I was pretty interested in this paper came about because of the fact that women have a 1 in 4 chance of being sexually assaulted in college. The evolutionary theory behind sexual coercion and rape interested me because I thought that realizing that the animal reproductive system led males to try to sexually coerce women for sexual reproduction, for a sexual reproductive strategy. The objective of the study was to look at 3 different aspects of judgment and hypothetical decisions made by male college students. Instead of taking all 3 judgment decisions, I decided to just look at sexual arousal in terms of understanding how that affected sexual coercion and sexual behavior. The hypothesis that the authors pretty much stated was that if you're aroused, it's actually going to affect your sexual decision, especially when it comes to morally sexual. Anyway, so the methods of the study were the following. You have 35 college male students that took a questionnaire at home, in the comfort of their own home and with their laptop. And then you had 3 conditions. You had the non-arousal, you had the arousal, the immediate arousal, and then you had the prior arousal. I will explain further what this all means. Essentially what happened was, during the arousal state, they were presented with this screen. As you can tell, you have a sexually explicit image in the middle of the screen. You have a meter on the right of the screen, which measures your arousal. And then at the bottom you have the questionnaire. The questionnaire asked certain questions ranging from how likely would it be to have your drink, a date, have a drink, to how likely would you try to procure that date to have sex with you, even though she said no. You then also had a 75% arousal threshold that the authors wanted the subjects to get to in order to answer the question. This was all self-induced arousal, so they had to be masturbating, and what they did with the actual keyboard on the computer was that they made it accessible so that the non-dominant hand could answer the questions while they were masturbating. You had again, explicit images, and you had a questionnaire. The results, as you can probably, once it gets larger, the results are the following. They asked 5 questions, analyzed the data using a 5x2 ANOVA test, and what the results suggest is that the arousal state has significant effect on the responses to the different images. The questions were not all the same, and finally that the arousal state had a similar effect on the different questions. I will further explain this by showing you a better image of the results. Essentially what this all means is that the arousal had a significant influence on the subject's self-reported likelihood of procuring for sex after a participant said no. What's really interesting about this study is if you look at the 3rd, 4th, and 5th questions that the study had given, one of the more significant ones, in my opinion, and pretty interesting to look at, is the 5th one. Would you keep trying to have sex after the date says no? Not only is this interesting because it's almost twice, because males who were aroused are almost twice as likely to say yes versus males who were unaroused. And then the other questions, would you would you try to have sex with a date or try to increase your chances with your date after potentially offering her a drink? To just further the point, I want to just take a look at the fact that sexual arousal limits one's ability that sexual arousal limits one's ability and kind of creates a tunnel vision. When you're in this heat of the moment, I think it's extremely important to consider. It's extremely important to consider the effects of being in the heat of the moment, as well as the fact that being sexually aroused has a significant effect on what kind of things and behaviors you partake in. And to relate it back to our chapter, again, it's interesting to try to consider how important sexual arousal in the heat of the moment has the effects of it on college-age students, and potentially could explain the percentages of how women are being exposed to these sexual coercion acts. Thank you.